as far back as I can remember, just wanted to play, and I was so so convinced that this is what I would be doing. I kind of ignored everything else. My schoolwork was just appalling, you know, that how the school sort of put up with me. And my parents got me my first drum kit when I was 9 years old, because I'd made the effort to. I'd sort of left school one day, you know, like you do at sort of 4 o'clock or whatever time it was, and I'd heard that there was a drum kit for sale. Graham Eldridge, who had this drum kit for sale, and he lived in a house with a threepenny-bit window in St John's Road in Newport. And I just sort of, instead of going home after school, I walked all the way to Newport, which was a bit of a schlep, you know, about sort of 6 or 7 miles. Oh. And I found the house and knocked on the door and said, you know, I think you have a drum kit for sale. I said, yeah, and they took me in and sort of showed me this old, it was almost like a vaudeville kit. There was like a brass cymbal and one sort of hanging tom, an odd side drum, and the hi-hats. Anyway, it didn't matter because I just thought it was the most amazing thing. And then I walked all the way home. And when I got in, my parents were furious. They were going, where have you been? You know, well, we've been worried sick. Yeah, and I said, you know, I said to my dad, well, I heard there was this drum kit for sale in Newport, and I walked there and I had a look. And my dad said, well, show me. You show me where you went, you know. And we jumped in the car and we drove all the way back. And Dad, you know, bing bong. He said, my son came and looked at a drum kit earlier on. And the woman said, oh yes, would you like to come in and have a look? You know, sort of wiping her hands with the tea towels, all very mumsy. And my dad was so impressed that I'd sort of had the oomph to go and do that he said, you know, how much do you want for it? It was 10 quid. Which doesn't sound a lot now, but I think my dad then was earning about 17 quid a week or something in the prison service. And he bought the drum kit. And then I got to school the next day, and I told the music teacher I've got this drum kit. So she said, right, bring it into assembly. And this is the first kit I'd ever had, and I just sort of took to it. It had no sort of mystery at all. It was sort of what it was meant to be. And my dad was really excited because he kept saying, oh, I used to play drums when I was in Newport. I used to play in the Women's Institute Hall and stuff. And I'm not sure that he ever did, actually. Because I'd say, well, show me. And he'd go, go on, this is for you to do. So I never ever heard him play the drums, you know, in all my life. But that was it. And that was the first time I just felt really famous, I suppose, because the music teacher was really impressed. And she said, oh, we've got to feature this in the choir thing. And then we went off and did a gig at Carisbrooke Secondary Modern, as it was then. And the parents all, wow, this is just great, you know. And then in the car on the way back home, my dad was saying to my mum, Bridget, did you see that? Did you hear that? You know. And that was it. It was kind of like the touch paper had been lit. And it also coincided with hearing Cream and seeing Ginger Baker on top of the Pops playing I Feel Free, or one of the great Cream songs, and Eric Clapton stood there, and Jack Bruce giving it all of this great voice and amazing bass playing. And I was sort of absolutely besotted with seeing this band. I'd got a cornflakes box, and I cut the front out and made 3 figurines that I would sort of dance around and put the album on, which my granny bought me for my birthday, and was just sort of seeing them play. The thing is that the drums are pretty noisy, as you know, and my mum was really worried about neighbours because we just lived in terraced houses, and it was the drums were set up in the landing, you know, upstairs, and because it was in the landing, it was even more resonant. So she wouldn't let me in. I was forbidden to play the drums because it would annoy the neighbours. So sort of every Thursday afternoon, she'd go to the supermarket to get shopping, and I used to go like hell on the drums. You know, I had this
Was that only a short window? Oh yeah,
Yeah,
90 minutes.
90 minutes.
Was that it? A week
Go.
that you could practice?
Yeah, but it's ephemeral, you know, that if you get it, you can do, you just do so much of it in your head, you know, it's like constantly lying. Any young drummer will tell you that, you know, the great sound you get from your chest when you, all that sort of good. And I'd just be fiddling around. My granny and granddad, we'd sort of go out in their Austin 1100 for an ice cream on Cow Seafront, and I was just rolling the film.
Thinking about grooves.
Yeah. And my granddad would go, shut up, would you? But that was just it. You know, in a way, I suppose you could say that I probably had a bit of a condition. If I look back on it now, you know, I was always, you know, hands flying about and stuff, and anyway, you can do a lot of this stuff in your head. It's funny because if you leap forward to now, well, actually leap forward to 1990, we played a gig. We had Gary Husband in the band on drums, and we had the late great Alan Holdsworth on guitar. And Alan is a truly great musician of all time. You know, just a phenomenal virtuoso. As is Gary, but. Anyway, we were touring and we played Leeds University or something like that, and we were sort of just getting off the tour bus, and there was this kid, this 11-year-old kid who stood there with an armful of albums, and he said, you know, could you sign this, yeah? And then he said, can I come in and watch the sound check? He said, I love the band. Yeah, he said, yeah, sure, come on in and watch it. And then he said, can I have a go on Gary's drums? Yeah, and Gary was real sweet at heart, you know, and he had the photographs to show us, and he got on, and I said, you know, what songs do you want to play? You know, what songs do you know? And he said, oh, I know all of them. And anyway, off he went, and that was Pete Ray Biggin, who's drummer in the band now. So at 11 years of age,
that's an amazing
that sort of that precocious talent, you know, and Pete. You know, Pete's sort of on the spectrum as well, so he's, you know, he's really quick. You want to see him in a go-kart, it's just incredible. We always go karting on days off when we're out on tour. It seems to be a good bonding thing and a great fun thing to do. Man, nobody can touch Pete, he's just like, you know. So I'm glad he's in a band and playing, because I think if he was out twocking cars, he'd have killed himself, you know, years ago. And he's been in the band now since 2010, so that's 9 years.
That's such a nice story.
Yeah, it was something that sort of resonated with me, because I kind of had the same thing when I was, you know,
kind of like
10 years old.
Almost obsessive about music.
Yeah,
We're always thinking about it.
That was it, you know. Schoolwork, didn't matter, you know. You know, when I got to do my O levels, as they were called then, or GCSEs, or whatever they're called now. I never even bothered reading the books that I've been given. Just one, because it's like you have to read this, and I'm really not big on sort of being told what to do. Yeah, exactly. You know, so being told to read a book, that wasn't it. And then sort of sitting there, it only dawned on me, you know, what a twerp I was when, you know, the book was Ring of Bright Water. And they were just asking who the characters were in the book. I mean, what could be simpler than that? Unless you haven't read the book.
Yeah, of course.
And they're going, who was Stinky Poo? You know, and I just thought, I don't know, there's mongoose. I heard somebody talk about a mongoose. There isn't a mongoose in it, you know. But so consequently, I failed everything. And my friends, I had a really, really good friend, Adam Ockelford, who is a wonderful man, fantastic musician. And he's professor of music at Roehampton University, and he works very much with blind children. And Derek Paravarici is actually, he mentors him, and I don't know if you know the story about Derek, but he was born with ROP, which is retina of prematurity, retinopathy of prematurity, something like that. And it's because he was born prematurely, and he was put in the oxygen tent, and the retina, at such an early age, their retinas really can't take that massive blast of oxygen, so you know, the blood vessels just go at the back, and then the kids are blind from then on.
Okay.
He was also, he sort of suffered problems, and he was severely autistic. But he has this incredible savant ability where, which started becoming apparent when he was 4 or 5 years old, that he could sit at a piano and he could hear a piece of music and play it. And he's gone on to, you know, he now tours and gives concerts wherever he goes. You know, in his personal life, he can, you know, he struggles to dress himself. He can't do any of the things that we sort of take for granted, that we think, you know, that would make him an idiot. But of course, it's not. He's just somewhere else on the spectrum. And his talent, his hearing is everything. And absolutely incredible talent, you know, just unbelievable talent. Anyway, his mentor is Professor Adam Walkerford. And I was at school with him. Me and Adam went through Cowes High School together. And Adam was fantastic, you know, he was sort of grade 8 piano by the time he was 13 or 14, and you know, he'd do his music O level, no problem, and he did his music A level, absolutely no problem. And I was still struggling. I couldn't get my head around any of that, because it didn't seem important to me in the slightest. I just had this absolute conviction that it didn't matter, you know, there's no point in me doing this, because I needed actually to be concentrating on all this stuff. Why not become the greatest drummer in the world? Which obviously never happened, but it didn't matter, because it was just this sort of blind drive that was going to get me, you know, off of the Isle of Wight, move to London, and then make it in the music business, you know, which, you know, whatever else anybody says, ultimately I did do that.
Yeah, you did. Going, you know, like some of the things that you got told to read at school, or like things that you got taught and kind of thought, well, this is a bit long, I'm not really interested in this. Did you ever find yourself in hindsight kind of actually investigating it for yourself?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a very astute thing, because my wife Ria studied horticulture, and she, you know, she really went into it, and she just had all of these amazing books of horticulture, and you know, and I just had this thing. I've always loved trees, and so I just started reading up about the trees, and I sort of carry in my head the Latin names of our indigenous trees, and my teachers would have been proud of me if I could go back to Cowes High School now and say, look, you know, I actually can carry something in my head. And you're absolutely right, you know, that when I left school, science fiction, I just adored Isaac Asimov books and Frank Herbert books and Arthur C. Clarke's books, you know. I mean, 2001 is a masterpiece, you know, not just the book, but the film. And then, you know, 2010, it is just as good. It's just like fantastic, this vision that these people sort of have in their heads. I really love that. That creativity is, you know, is fantastic. So yeah, you know, it was just that as a kid,
wasn't what you were into.
It wasn't what I was into at all. It was just the music, you know. The music.
And being dictated to is not nice for you.
It's not good, is it? You know, and I suppose some kids take to it and some kids don't. You know, and I was just one of the don't camp.
Well, a lot in the don't camp end up making it. And what I wanted to ask you next was you know, how do you see, or like how do you remember, or kind of like what's the version that you've got of how things went from that tunnel-eyed focus on drumming to level 42 taking off, and you know, was it a great struggle, or was it something that you know, you remember it being quite easy?
No, it was always, you never knew what was coming, and I found the uncertainty of actually having left home and moved to London. And of course, you know, my other buddies in the band, Phil Gould, who was the original drummer and lyricist, and Mike Lindop, the keyboard player, and obviously Mike's still in the band today. and Phil's older brother Boongle, the guitarist and lyricist. You know, we were just, they did it right, really. Well, maybe not so much Boone, but like Phil and Mike went to the Guildhall School of Music, Mike, and Phil went to the Royal Academy of Music. So they kind of had this, you know, they had this system that they could fit into. For me, I just sort of came up and I got a job in a music store, you know, in Charing Cross Road, Macari's Music. But just because at least I would sort of somehow be connected with music, but there was just this sort of inward fear of like, what if this doesn't happen? You know, am I really gonna? And you know, the odd times that I go home and visit my parents, you know, Dad would say, "Why don't you come home, Nipper? You know, it must be horrible up there. You know, just struggling." And I think it was because he said that. In a way, it made me think, no, I just have to keep going. You know, I need to make something happen with the music. And you know, as sort of chance would have it, when I was working in Macari's, I got a chance to go and join a band in Austria as drummer, because that's what I wanted to do. So, you know, as I always do, I just sort of throw everything into it. And I took my albums and my clothes and my drum kit, jumped in the back of this van, and off we went to Austria. 3 months later, nothing's happened at all. You know, there was one gig, everybody was starving. And I just thought, I've got to get out of here. And the other guys in the band said, yeah, well, you know, we'll chip together, we'll get your ticket home. And we'll send the drums on and your clothes and your record, you know, your vinyl collection later. And of course that never happened. You know. But I did go back, I went back to Vienna about 4 months later to get them. And at a music store, and half my drums were in the window and half had been sold already, so that was gone. The albums, my precious vinyl collection was just gone. You know. But that's all right. These are the things that kind of harden you up and make you realise that it's a tough world, and
yeah,
you know, you just got to get on with it. You know, so I came home and it did focus me on, well, one thing, the bass guitar, because it's like now I didn't have any drums. And, you know, Boone and Phil and myself and Mike used to get together and jam on a Monday evening. And Phil had the drum kit, so that's kind of, you know, it's his drum kit. So although like Boone and I would be swapping between bass and guitar and whatnot, and you know, Phil was on the drums and Mike was on piano, even though Mike was studying percussion at the Guildhall. So yeah, that was it. But working in Macari's, I had the chance, because they didn't send any drums, there were no drums in there. They sold accordions and guitars and whatnot. So I'd sort of watch, every so often you get like one of the sort of touring bands that come in, and some cool dude would walk in and say, "Let me have a look at that Fender there." Sort of passing the Fender, and he'd sort of go pong, 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 pong. And he'd say, "Yeah, man, you should check out Larry Graham and all this." And I was just sitting, sort of soaking this all in, thinking, well, I can do that. You know, this is something that, once again, it was a bit like the drumming thing. It doesn't actually hold any. There's no mystery to me about this. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so. It's great, you know, it's like, well, see you, man, yeah, thanks very much for the chat, guitar in the back room, bang, 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 this is, yeah, bang, bang, bang. And then I just started, you know, drumming on the bass guitar, really. I was doing what I wanted to do, but now on a different instrument. And this is where the luck came in. It's because this happened to be 1979. Just 1980 was coming in, punk was on its way out. And people were looking for something else, and there was this thing called Brit Funk starting. So the Funk Mafia, the DJs were running these all-nighters and soul weekenders and what have you. And a guy called Adi Soika, who had his own independent record label, Elite Records, and he just had a hit with his band called Dancing in Outer Space. His band was Atmosphere. He was sort of just looking out and around, and he knew John Gould, who was working at MCA, and that was Phil and Boone's older brother. He was doing marketing or promotion at MCA. And he said, "Oh, you should go and see my brother's band. You know, that they sort of, it sounds quite funky to me, you know." And he came along and heard it, and he was sort of quite unimpressed, but said, "There's one thing you do," he said, "it's where you're playing bass to me, and if you can get a singer to come in and sing it and come up with a melody line, I'll record it." And we did, and that became Love Meeting Love, the first single, which wasn't all sort of flying thumbs and bits and pieces, but it was great because suddenly, you know, you wouldn't believe how exciting it was hearing your record being played on the radio, on power play, on like Radio Caroline, you know, and some of these sort of more, you know, off the scale radio stations, and that was just incredible. And then pow, that was it. We sort of thought, this is where we're going from here. And then, like, before you knew it, came up with Love Games and the riff for Love Games, and the time was just right, and people were going, "Oh, this is amazing, you know, is this a band from America that are doing this stuff," you know. And obviously we weren't, you know, a band from the Isle of Wight.
But it does, you know, you would assume.
Oh yeah, of course, you know, because our heroes, all our influences, you know, were all bands that were sort of American based, really. You know, your Earth, Wind and Fires and your Herbie Hancocks and Stevie Wonders and Return to Forever and Mahavishnu Orchestra and all these amazing musicians. And that's really
all in there in that.
Yeah, it's all in there.
Well, we've interviewed Verdine from Earth, Wind and Fire.
Oh, he's a lovely guy, isn't he?
Yeah, he was a real sweetheart, I thought.
Yeah, he was fantastic. We had the great pleasure and honour of having them produce an album for us in 1983. So we got to spend 3 months recording in the Complex, which was their studio in Los Angeles.
What an incredible experience.
It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. You know.
So with everybody from, or was it like?
No, it was Verdine White and Larry Dunn, who were the keyboard player and the bass player. You know, but Maurice, every once in a while, had dropped by, and you know, B. Lloyd Taylor co-wrote the song with us. So it was incredible, and it was their studio, you know, and it was amazing because it's like the Complex was very good. George Massenburg had like his own laboratory there, so he invented the flying faders. So all of this sort of tech was really high tech and sort of cutting edge stuff. And you know, George Duke and Louis Johnson were working in next door, and they just sort of stuck their head in the stuff. And you know, my God, man, it's Louis Johnson, it's George Duke, you know, clunk. And yeah, it was just an amazing experience. It was an incredible experience, you know, and it gave us our first top 10 single here in the UK. So, you know, something was working right. But I always felt when we were there, because you know, we wanted to go and learn how they were doing this stuff. You know, what was the secret of like Earth, Wind and Fire, and how did they get that sort of so tight and so smooth? But I think the reason they were quite intrigued with us and wanted to produce us, because they'd heard us when they were touring Europe in '82, and they wanted to know what it was that we were doing. Yeah, they would. That people were listening to and why it was being successful, albeit on an underground level. But it was like people were talking, you know, saying, "Oh, you heard this band." So they were, you know, so we get in the studio and they were going like, "So what you got then?" You know, we're going, "Well, you know, what you tell us? Yeah, tell us what to do." And anyway, we ended up with that, and The Sun Goes Down, Living It Up was the sort of the top 10 single, but it was very enjoyable. And the record company, obviously, they just invested in sort of 3 months with us. Now they were starting to take it seriously. So then they got some stylists involved, and then we started shooting videos, promo videos, because they were sort of, if you didn't have a video, you weren't anybody. It was all part of the thing, you know. And you know, when I look back now, you know, at photographs from that period in time, you know, I think, yeah, it's all right. And I just still see the sort of the kid in me that was just winging it, you know, the whole time. It was just.
That's the best bit.
It is the best. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
That's what makes this whole industry just so amazing and fascinating.
Well, I think it is. Yeah, because it's, you know, it's like that, the old national lottery thing where a hand comes out of the clouds and goes, "It's you."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
ting, you know, and you get the crack at it, because you wouldn't believe how many amazing musicians I know that can't get arrested, you know.
But it's that kind of, even when you're talking about daydreaming at school, it's that already is a sign that you're probably going to be one of those different people, because you care more. You care more about that, and you care about other things that other people sort of think, well, maybe I'll get around to the music in the evening.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true. You know, that is true.
Didn't even occur to you. There was no mystery to the fact that music is kind of more important than this stuff.
It was just there. That was absolutely fundamental. How I found it. It comes back to what I said in the first place. I was just convinced that I didn't have to worry about anything else, because that was going to happen. It was going to be all right, just because it was all just sort of popping around in my head, you know. And they were, in a lot of ways, you're spoiled for choice now, the kids, you know. It's not a bad thing, it's a great thing that YouTube's there, so everybody can check out everybody else, you know. And I see the sort of the skill levels of, the current crop of players and the ones that are coming through, and
so it's free education.
Yeah, it is, and it's incredible, because that's their university, you know. That's the schooling that they're getting, is actually visual and audio. You know, whereas with me, if I saw like the Mahavishnu Orchestra, quite by chance in concert on BBC Two back in 1972, it took 10 days for the vinyl to arrive, you know. And even then, I'd go to the record store, and there was a band on in concert the other night, you know. I said they were just incredible musicians, and I said one guy was just dressed in white, and he had like very sort of smart haircut. The guy sort of said, I said, and the drummer had this glass drum kit. I said it was made of glass, and that was Billy Cobham, of course. And and the guy's going, yeah, what do you think about that? Oh, I said, was that the Mahavishnu Orchestra? Yeah, right, I'll order the vinyl for you. And then you had to wait 10 days. You know,
so you kind of treasure it more as a result. It's almost an embarrassment of riches now for everyone.
Get in that vinyl up your school blazer and cycling home after you've gone
really
out,
excited.
picked it up, was just incredible. And then putting it on the stereogram, you know, and that. Down. I was like, oh my God. And I was lucky, because I had another really good friend of mine, Simon Footer, who went on to join the Air Force and had a fantastic career in the Air Force. He looked a bit like Brian Ferry, and I'd also seen Roxy Music on in concert, and it was just that whole sort of the image thing. It was the first time I think I've been conscious of the image thing. You know, it was about the same time that the Bowie thing was, you know, this glam rock thing. It was just like, so, you know, and when you're 14, 15 years of age, it's a very attractive thing, because you just think, how can they be like that? You know, you look at yourself in the mirror, and you've got a pudding ball cut, and you've got a blazer that your mum thought you'd grow into, so you're sort of constantly walking along with sleeves down here and stuff, you know, briefcase, with nothing in it, because I wasn't bothering to do anything anyway. You know, I looked like a hovercraft. Because you couldn't see my feet because of the briefcase, and when you couldn't see my hands, just sort of drifting up and down the school corridors. But there was Roxy Music, and there was Bowie, and you know, when we got the Roxy Music album, the first one, and Simon and I used to go home and just, you know, particularly on Thursdays when Mum was at the supermarket, it's like definitely there. I bet all the neighbours just sort of dreaded Thursday afternoons, actually.
Well, you never know. Maybe that. I bet they're all talking about it now, saying what they heard and.
Maybe. I always thought he'd do all right. I thought he'd make it. Yeah, he was a cheeky one. That sort of thing. But, one of our neighbours, the lady, sort of had this great habit of mishearing lyrics. And there was a Max Romeo song. My sister had the 45, and it was "Lie down, girl, let me push it up, lie down." And she was hearing it as "Let me push it up," which I sort of thought was funny.
Like, what are the kind of deep cuts or the album tracks and tracks that the casual
Oh,
listeners
yeah.
don't like, but say they're watching this interview and they don't just want hits. You know,
Well, it will
what's
be.
something to listen to? Yeah.
Yeah. Eyes Water Falling, I think, is there's a track called Eyes Water Falling. I think that was on album 2, The Pursuit of Accidents. I could be wrong though, I always get these things wrong. June Tune on the Level 42 album. The early tapes is interesting because, you know, when I listen to it, it's almost like a diary of where we wanted to go, where we thought we'd be going, and which was different from where we ended up. But you know, one thing I am proud of with Level 42 is the fact that we did develop as songwriters, and we developed really quite well, you know, because we all started out really not knowing about how to structure any of this stuff and do it. We just were 4 mates who jammed. And then we had Wally Badger who came in, really from record 1, you know, as the 5th member, and Wally was a great sort of soundsmith. So, you know, you can really enjoy some really good sort of synth erotica and sounds, you know, that Wally and Mike used to sort of pull together and do. Yeah, so I mean, there's lots of things, but I'm happy to say that, you know, that there weren't any of our albums that were just sort of out and out attempts at poppery, because you can listen to any of the albums, and if you don't listen to the ones that you will hear on Radio 2 or whatever, you will find some stuff in there that's quite sort of, yeah, that's quite challenging and quite go ahead for its time.
Well, it was a real pleasure to meet you. So
Thanks, Thomas. Well, it's lovely chatting to you. Well, you just did a lot of listening, didn't you? Sorry about that.
No, those are the best type.
Start rambling when you're 60.